so excited to be here on another education expedition, and we're here today with Dr. Tony Mann, Superintendent of Molalla, and we're actually today at Harmony Academy Recovery High School, the only one of its kind in the state of Oregon. And this was your little brainchild, Tony, and I'm so excited to be here. I'd love to hear how you came up with this idea.
There were times early in my tenure in Molalla when I served as the expulsion hearings officer. And then a phone call came in to my office, and William was calling to make an appointment with the superintendent. And I don't know many 17-year-olds that'll call and make an appointment with the superintendent themselves, but he did. And he said, you know, my expulsion period's coming to an end, Mr. Mann, and I've done everything that was asked of me, and I'm here to ask for your help. I can't go back to my neighborhood high school. If I go back to my neighborhood high school, I'm dead. I'll be back and I'll be surrounded by the same circumstances and the same people that had me at the place. And you expelled me, and you should have. And I need an opportunity to go to a different high school. I need an opportunity for a fresh start. And so I did what I could at that moment in time. And I made a few phone calls to a couple of districts and, hey, would you be willing to take on this student? The superintendent with whom I spoke did what I probably would have done. I went to the high school principal. When there's risk associated with that voluntary decision for other students, I think that high school principal and superintendent made the decision I would have made. And it's like, no, a convicted felon, drug dealer. And it broke my heart, you know, that I couldn't find a pathway to enroll William in a public high school that wasn't that fresh start. As the parent of young people, I have two wonderful sons, and I'm proud of both. The younger of the two was, as a 16-year-old, really experiencing addiction, which, if you're experienced with addiction, was the fast and furious type. My wife and I were terrified. And you'd think a guy who works in education, who supports children and families in crisis for a career, would have a solution. And I thought there might have been. So I knocked on every door of every person of influence with knowledge and access, and all those doors opened up. And there was nothing behind any of them. My wife and I found a solution for our son. My son today has a live, vibrant, compelling vision for himself. He's a successful business owner in Arizona, and that came because my wife and I found a resource, not in Oregon, but out of state. And it required that my wife and I liquidate every asset that we had. As a public educator, with core values around, you know, every student deserves what they need to pursue a vibrant and compelling future for themselves. I learned that there was a school in Texas that was the nation's leading recovery high school, and paid a visit with others from healthcare and business and philanthropy to see, you know, is this really a thing? And to walk into a high school with 100 more students, all of whom identify as individuals in recovery from addiction, and to hear their stories, it's like, this is real.
So I'm Sharon Dursi Martin. I'm the principal of Harmony Academy. I'm also the board secretary for the National Association of Recovery Schools. I believe that recovery high schools work because we meet kids where they are, but we don't leave them there. And so what that means is that students can show up, and if they have an interest in changing their relationship with substances, they have a whole community of other young people that are doing the same thing. They can speak honestly about what's going on in their lives, and they can have their own goals. And I think it really works because when I was an alternative school teacher, I loved working with this same kind of demographic, but the assumption was that we would just ignore their drug use and work around it. And here we don't have to work around it anymore. we get to actually talk about what's happening. And so I think that hiring people that are non-judgmental, that really actually legitimately love adolescents, and then really letting the youth contribute to program development, to have an open door policy where they can come and say, hey, I think it would work better if, or I think we should do a field trip too, or what if when the new students come in we kind of do this policy or that policy.
I'm not sure how familiar folks are with the nature of addiction, but the Surgeon General was very clear in, I think, 2017 that addiction is not a moral failing.
Right.
It's a chronic condition of the brain, and there is a solution.
Mm-hmm.
It just really helps have a group or a program that's culturally specific to young people. And I don't ever want to ignore that young people are their own culture, and that the interventions that we use for adults don't typically work with them. It's got to be designed by them for them.
Oregon, at the time, in 2015, 16, 17, 18, national data, not data here in Oregon, but
Right.
federal data illustrated that Oregon was the worst state in the country to raise an adolescent experiencing addiction. If you look at the instance of access to any kind of continuum of care, Oregon was at the bottom of the 50 states
Right.
year after year.
One of the reasons that happens is because there's a lot of stereotypes about who gets addicted and who doesn't, right? And
It doesn't discriminate by zip code or by any other description of the human. It's part of the human experience.
mm-hmm.
It's part of, it has been for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful today that there's some science behind how to help those who might be in that kind of context. The idea that there's shame and stigma tied to
Right.
addiction is part of what I think creates a barrier and has created a barrier.
I know there's a lot of people that are getting ready to start recovery schools in Oregon because of the legislation we helped pass. And what I would say to them is that there's people that have been doing this a long time, and they have a lot of joy in the hope that they've seen cultivated through recovery schools, and they want to share what worked for them. Somebody gave me the advice when I first started out. She runs the recovery school, well, not anymore, but she was running the recovery school called Archway that they made a documentary about, Sasha, and she said to me, you have to be okay with mediocrity in the beginning. And I said, I don't like mediocrity at all. But that first year, I had to keep the ideal of, a vibrant youth recovery community where the youth are helping each other and mentoring each other, and the academics are excellent, and kids are graduating with a vision of this future for themselves where they're empowered and they have agency and they have a whole network of friends in recovery, and they're just this groundswell of youth. I had to keep that ideal while we just suffered through not being able to get the technology together, and teachers coming in here and being like, oh, this isn't what I thought. And there's a lot of that. We think that we want to work with youth in early recovery, but we have expectations for them sometimes that surpass the expectations that we have for adults. And so finding the right team that is like, oh, you're right where you're supposed to be, how can I help you right now? That can use motivational interviewing instead of lecturing or expecting kids to be different.
This is not a school where kids get sent. This is a school where kids choose to step forward one day at a time and say, I'm interested in doing life differently.
And youth do recover.
Right.
People do recover. And that's, if I hadn't had that belief in the beginning, I think the pandemic and the startup and the staff turnover in the beginning, I think that would have worn me down. But I fundamentally believe that people recover and change their lives, and it's never too young to start that. And it's really a reciprocal process where we hold hope and we hold space for the young people, and then they demonstrate that they're experts in their own lives and that they have power to change their own lives, and that change renews our hope, and then we have, our hearts are filled up and we can give that back to them. It's not about being good.
Right.
It's about freedom. It's about personal freedom and agency, and the more that we can help the kids find their own power and agency, the greater changes they can make in their lives. And it's not, stopping using drugs, like that brings you from like this, basement of despair up to the
Right.
ground level. But nobody ever stops there. I feel like once people get into recovery and realize that they can change something so like life-threatening and something that pervaded their entire life and took all their time, once they realize that they can change that, they're like, well, what else could I change? You know what I mean? Maybe I could travel. Maybe I could, start a meeting at a local recovery center.
Maybe I can be a principal.
Maybe I can be a principal.
Recovery academy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a
High
kid that got
school.
expelled from
Right.
public school, and to be a public school principal, it's beating the odds.
Right.
And it's refusing to be a statistic, and it's refusing to give up on hope.
Not only is this possible, but it produces results. A student who attends a recovery high school compared with a student who returns to their neighborhood high school after some form of treatment is twice as likely to be substance-free 6 months later. And the kind of brain development that's happening for an adolescent without a substance on board over those 6 months, and then extrapolate that over a lifetime,
Right.
the cost-benefit analysis, even for the, for those who are only looking at this in terms of money, right?
Right.
The cost-benefit analysis for society doing this important work is key. So, to be able to say that this is an innovation that, if done in alignment with the standards that were established by innovators in Texas, innovators in Massachusetts, that Oregon really could be at a place where we're now no longer last in the nation, but first in the nation, is a really proud moment for myself as a school leader and others who have been partners with us. We are grateful for the leadership of the Oregon legislature in passing House Bill 2767, which allows for adequate funding for recovery high schools geographically across the state. We are the only state in the country with this kind of proven say that if a kid attends a recovery high school, their abstinence, their regular school attendance, their recidivism in criminal justice system, all head the direction that we want for all children. And it's one of the few times when I could say without a doubt there is a recipe for doing this really, really well. And that's what's happening here at Harmony.
Anything different when I started, I would hold hope more. I would hold more hope. I think that first year I went out of hope a lot, where I was like, maybe I'm the wrong person to be doing this. Maybe it's not possible at this moment. Maybe, and I think, I had enough hope to pull it through, but I could have had a lot more joy if I'd realized that, the people that show up to do things in the world are the right people. The kids that show up at the school are the right people. If you're here and you're ready to do it and you're ready to like collaborate with other people and make it happen, it's like Tony talks about the coalition of the willing.
Right.
That's what it takes.
Yeah.
So,
As an educator in a world where our stakeholders deserve results, it's easy to go to a place of making all your decisions in analytical ways to figure out where to move chess pieces on a chessboard to get their results for students. And that's part of the work. I think one of the things that I really learned on this particular journey has been that when I let go of the intellectual and I'm coming at it from a heart-led place, that people are called to missions that are heart-led. And the idea that a coalition came together around this, I think in hindsight, if I look back at the number of times I told my story or talked about the vision of adolescents in recovery, it wasn't the intellect that drew people to that mission and that vision. It was the heart and the belief, that leap of faith that somehow if we do something different, that something different is possible.